Chapter 7. Somehow I made it home. I don't know how. I have no memories of anything after that last sight of the Hork-Bajir. I wish I had no memories of anything that happened that night. If only I could forget it all. I called around to the others. Everyone was shaky, but they were all alive. Rachel kept trying to apologize for leaving me. Marco just kept asking me if I was sure this wasn't a dream. I guess I should have had the worst nightmares of my life that night, but I didn't. The world of nightmares was a joke compared to my new reality. But by the next morning, a Saturday, I half believed it had all been a nightmare. The only thing that seemed real, really real, was the way the Andalite had of smiling with just his eyes. I woke when my mom started pounding on my door. "Jake, are you awake in there?" I was now. Yeah, I groaned. "I'm up. Your friend Tobias is here." Tobias? What was he doing here? "It's me," Tobias's voice. "Can I come in?" Sure." I sat up in my bed and blinked several times, trying to get my eyes unglued. The door opened. I heard Tobias say thank you to my mom. He was glowing. I swear he was glowing. Not like he was radioactive or anything. I didn't mean that. It's just that his eyes were shining bright, and his face was one big grin, and he seemed to be tingling with energy, bouncing like he couldn't stand still. "I did it," Tobias said. I tried to get my hair to go in one direction by raking my fingers through it. "What are you talking about?" I was yawning when he answered. "I became Duke." I stopped yawning. My mouth actually snapped shut. Duke is Tobias's cat. "Huh?" Tobias glanced around like there might be spies in the room. "I became Duke, just like the Andalite said." I just stared. It was so amazing. It didn't hurt or anything. I was petting him and thinking about the whole thing last night, right? So I thought, why not give it a try? He was pacing back and forth, snapping his fingers, bursting with enthusiasm, very unlike Tobias. I didn't even know how to begin, so I just made sure the door to my room was locked. Fortunately, my uncle was still asleep. Tobias has the most screwed up family I know. He never knew who his father was, and his mom just decided to leave him a few years ago. Since then, he'd been shuttled back and forth between his uncle here and his aunt who lives on the other coast. His aunt and his uncle can't stand each other. It's like Tobias is some burden that they try to shove off on the other. I get the feeling neither of them cares about Tobias. So there I was, just sitting on my bed thinking about it, concentrating, thinking about becoming Duke. I looked down at my hand. He grinned at me. "What do you think I saw, Jake?" I shook my head slowly. "I don't know." "I had fur, Jake. I was growing claws. You should have seen the real Duke. He went nuts. I had to put him outside before I could morph all the way. He clawed me up pretty good." Tobias stuck a sliced finger into his mouth. I swallowed hard. Okay, this was definitely crazy now. Tobias, is it possible you maybe just dreamed all this?" "Not a dream," he said. He was serious. He was serious Tobias again. The grin was gone. "It's all true, Jake, all of it." His eyes met mine. I knew what he was saying. He had tried to pretend it was all a nightmare too, but it was real. I looked away. I didn't want to start believing it had all been real. I wanted it all safely stored away in my head. Just another bad dream. Bad dreams should stay in your head, not come jumping out into real life. "I just kept concentrating on changing," Tobias said. "And in a few minutes, I was not myself anymore." His eyes bored into me. "You have no idea what it's like, Jake. Being a cat, I can't even describe it. You're so strong for one thing, just all this coiled power, and the way you can move. You know what I did? I jumped onto my dresser, 3 feet straight up in the air, and I landed like a feather. 3 feet. Do you know how high that is when you're a cat? It's like a person jumping maybe 30 feet straight up." He stopped suddenly and looked at me. "You don't believe me, do you?" he said. "Look, Tobias, it's just that sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between something real and something you're just imagining or dreaming. You think I'm crazy?" I considered it for a minute. "I don't know, Tobias. Let's review the facts. You say you turned into your own pet cat. You turned into an actual cat. Yes, I have to say that sounds crazy to me." Tobias nodded thoughtfully. He gave me a little smile. "I understand, Jake. You still don't want it to be true." "What? You mean, do I want to believe that you changed yourself into a cat? And all the rest of it? Do I want to believe that Earth is being invaded by slimy slugs who live in people's brains and turn themselves into slaves? Do I want to believe that? Duh. No. I don't want to believe any of it. And how about the Andalite? He said in a quiet voice. I hesitated. I don't know why, but I didn't want to just pretend the Andalite away. Tobias put his hand on my arm. Stand right there. What? What are you going to do? I'm going to help you decide whether it's real or not. Tobias, just wait and don't scream or anything. So I waited. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Tobias just stood there. I glanced at his face. His eyes were different. The pupils weren't completely round anymore. I swear there was a reflective greenish light in them, and his mouth was protruding a little, puffing out. He was shrinking, growing smaller right before my eyes. The neck of his shirt was loose. His pants started scrunching up at the ankles. He was shivering, and at that same time fur, yes fur, began to grow on his hands and neck and face. It was gray, striped with black, just like dudes. I had this absurd desire to start giggling. Tobias was becoming a tabby cat. But I knew if I had started giggling, I'd just keep on and never, ever be able to stop. Tobias was more cat than human now. The pointed ears rose atop his head. The whiskers stuck straight out from underneath his delicate pink nose. He had dropped to all fours, clothing now half draped over him, like so many rags. His tail twitched. Yes, his tail. I wondered if I would just drop dead from the lump that had filled my throat, or from the jackhammering pounding of my heart. Then I wondered if I was still asleep. But if it was a dream, it was a really convincing one. I was standing there in my bedroom, staring down at a gray-black cat that less than 2 minutes earlier had been my friend Tobias. Chapter 8. I hope I'm asleep, I muttered. I really do. You're not asleep. Is that you? I demanded of the cat. Can you hear me? Tobias sounded surprised, although sounded wasn't quite the right word. Yes, I said cautiously. I did not know if I could send thoughts like this, Tobias said, just like the Andalite. I guess it only works when you're morphed? Am I talking to a cat? I realized, and I thought Tobias was crazy. I wondered if Tobias had heard my thought. I concentrated. Tobias, can you hear me? Yeah, he said. I hear you. Did you hear my thoughts before that? I asked. No, I don't think it works that way. You have to think at me for me to hear. Hey, watch this. Suddenly, Tobias leaped through the air. He pounced precisely on an autographed baseball that was lying in the corner, maybe a 4-foot jump. That is so excellent. Hey, pull a string for me to chase. Pull a string? Why? Because it's so fun. I dug into my desk drawer and found a length of string left over from a birthday gift. I'm not exactly big on keeping my room clean. The string was from a birthday 2 years ago. How's this? I drew the string closely across the floor, a foot or more from Tobias's nose. He settled back on his haunches and began wiggling his hindquarters. He pounced. He landed on the string, grabbed it, and his sharp teeth rolled over and began ripping it like the string was the only thing on earth that mattered. I tried pulling the string away, but he pounced again. Yes! Got it! Tobias, what are you doing? Pull it faster. I see it. I got it. Tobias, what are you doing? I shouted. You're playing with a string. Suddenly he stopped. His tail twitched, and he looked up at me with those cold cat eyes, but I'm sure I saw a look of confusion there. I don't know, he admitted. It's like I'm me, but I'm also dude. I want to chase strings and, oh man, if only there was a real live mouse around. I'd really love to track it, to follow it so quietly, to listen to its heartbeat, to hear its scratchy little feet. I'd wait till just the right moment, and then a perfect pounce through the air, claws scratched out. He extended his claws to demonstrate. Tobias, I think we're learning something here, I said. Amazing how quickly I was becoming used to the idea of talking to a cat. What? What are we learning? I think you aren't just Tobias. You really are a cat. I mean, you have all the same instincts. You want to do things a cat wants to do. Yes, I can feel it. It's like I'm two different animals melded into one. I can think like a person and like a cat. You better change back, I said. He nodded his cat head up and down. Very weird to see. I can tell you, a cat nodding yes in a very thoughtful way. You're right. The change back to human form was at least as strange as the change to cat. The fur disappeared, leaving bare patches of pink skin behind. A nose grew out of the flat cat face. The tail was sucked up like a snake going up a vacuum cleaner. Tobias stood there, looking embarrassed. He quickly pulled on his clothes. Maybe with some practice we can figure out how to change back into our clothes. We? He smiled his gentle smile again. Don't you get it yet, Jake? If I can do it, so can you. I shook my head. I don't think so, Tobias. Suddenly he grew angry. He grabbed me by both my shoulders and actually shook me. Don't you understand, Jake? It's all true. All of it. I pushed him away. I didn't want to hear it, but he kept after me. Jake, it's all true. The Andalite gave us these powers for a reason. Fine, I snapped. You use them. I will, he said. But we'll need you, Jake. You most of all. Why me? He hesitated. Geez, Jake, don't you understand? I know what I can do and what I can't do. I can't make plans and tell people what to do. I'm not the leader. You are. I laughed rudely. I'm not the leader of anything. He just looked at me with those deep, troubled eyes I can now see only in my memory. Yes, Jake, you are our leader, and the only one who can bring us all together and help us defeat the controllers. We have the ability to be much more than we are. We have the stealth of a cat, and the eyes of eagles, and the sense of smell of a dog, and the speed of a horse or a cheetah. We're going to need it all if we have any hope of holding out against the controllers. I wanted it not to be true. I wanted none of it to be true. But I knew that it was. I nodded slowly. It felt like I was agreeing to something awful, like I was volunteering for a trip to the dentist or something much worse. It felt like 1,000,000 pounds of weight had just landed on my shoulders. I knew what I had to do next. Well, I said grimly, I guess I'd better go find Homer. Homer, that's my dog. Chapter 9. It isn't painful. Morphing, I mean. I petted Homer for a while, feeling like a complete and total fool. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done, I told Tobias. Look, you have to concentrate. At least I did. I mean, I formed this mental picture of Duke, right? I thought about becoming him. I see. So I have to, meditate on becoming a dog? That's right. You have to think about it. You have to want it. Normally, I would have figured he was nuts, but I had just seen him turn into a cat, so if he was nuts, so was I. I thought about becoming Homer. As I stroked his fur, I formed a picture in my mind of me becoming Homer. Homer became wildly quiet while I did it, like he was asleep, only his eyes were open. Just like Dude, Tobias commented. I think the process kind of puts the animal in a trance or something. He's just scared because he thinks his master is a Looney Tune. I continued stroking Homer's fur and concentrating, and Homer continued to lie very still. Okay, now what? I asked Tobias. Now we better put Homer outside. He might get slightly freaked by watching you turn into him. It took Homer about 10 seconds to come out of his trance, but then he jumped up, normal hyperactive Homer again. I put him outside in the yard. Tobias was sitting patiently when I got back, just waiting. Give it a try, he urged me. I took a deep breath. I closed my eyes. I recalled the picture of Homer I'd formed in my mind. I thought about becoming Homer. I opened my eyes. Bow wow, I said, laughing. Guess it didn't work for me, Tobias. The back of my hand itched, and I scratched it. Jake, Tobias said. What? Look at your hand. I looked at my hand. It was covered with orange fur. I jumped about a foot straight up in the air. Oh! I stared at my hand. The fur had stopped growing. Don't be scared, Tobias advised. Go with it. Now you've stopped the morph. You have to concentrate. My hand, I said. Fur. Yeah, and your ears, Tobias said. I ran to the mirror over my dresser. My ears had moved. They had slid up the side of my head and were definitely larger than they should be. Go on. It's so cool, Tobias said. Cool? It's creepy. It's weird. Look at my hands. I have fur. You have to do this, Tobias said. I don't have to do anything, I said sullenly. Tobias nodded. Okay, you're right. You don't have to do this. You can just forget what we saw last night, forget what we know, and as the Yeerks take over more and more people, you can just ignore it. We can all just go along, grow up in a world where human beings are nothing but bodies to be used by murdering aliens. Okay, when he put it that way, it didn't seem like a great option. Come on, Tobias urged. I swallowed hard. I closed my eyes. I thought of Homer, of being Homer. I felt the itch mess again, and when I opened my eyes, there was fur growing on my arms, and fur growing out of my face, and fur curling up from under my collar. My legs itched, and I realized they were growing fur too. My bones, well, they didn't exactly hurt, but they did feel very strange. You know when you go to the dentist and he gives you Novocaine so the drill doesn't really hurt, but you know it should hurt? I guess that's what it was like. My bones shortened. I could feel my backbone stretching as it extended out into a tail. There was a scraping sound as my knees suddenly reversed direction. I toppled forward, no longer able to walk upright. When my hands hit the floor, they weren't exactly hands anymore. The fingers were gone. All that was left were short, stubby nails. My face bulged out. My eyes drew closer together. Tobias got up and tilted the mirror down so I could see myself. I watched the final transformation as the last patches of my pink human flesh disappeared, and my tail, sprouted to its full length. I was a dog. It was insane, but just the same, I was a dog. I knew I should be scared by all this, only I wasn't. I was ecstatic. I was giddy. I was thrilled. Happiness just washed over me. Happiness filled me up. I breathed in through my ridiculously long nose, and wow, the smells. Oh man, you have no idea. I breathed in, and right away I knew my mom was toasting a waffle in the kitchen, and I knew Tobias had walked through the territory of a big male dog, and I knew things I couldn't even explain in human words. It was like being blind all your life, and then suddenly you can see. I ran over to Tobias and sniffed his shoe. I wanted a better idea of who that big male dog was. From the scent of his urine picked up by Tobias's shoe, I got sort of a picture of him. See, Homer knew him. His owners called him Streak. He was neutered, like me. He spent most of his time in his yard, but he broke out sometimes by digging under his fence. He got a mix of canned and dry food, Purina, no table scraps, unlike me. All this information made me happy all over again, and I had to wag my tail. I looked up at Tobias. He looked tall and strange and not very colorful. I wasn't all that interested in looking at stuff. Smelling things was way better. Intruder! There was a noise in the yard. A dog. An unknown dog in my yard. An intruder. I ran to the window and perched against it and cut loose. Row, 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 row. I barked as loud as I could. No way some unknown dog was just going to walk through my yard. Jake, get a grip, Tobias said. That's Homer out there. Homer? What? But I tucked my tail between my legs. What was going on? Jake, listen to me, Tobias said. It's just what happened to me when I morphed into a cat. The dog brain is part of your brain now. You have to deal with it. But there's a dog in my yard. That's Homer, Jake. You are Jake. You're just in a body copied from Homer's DNA. That's the real Homer out there. You put him out there. Focus. You are Jake. Jake! I took several deep breaths. The smells. Oh boy, there was this one smell I couldn't quite. Focus, Jake, I ordered myself. Focus. Slowly I calmed the dog part of my mind. Let go of the sound of the dog out of my yard. It wasn't easy that first time. Being a dog is so completely amazing. For one thing, there's nothing halfway about it. You're never sort of happy. You're happy. You're never sort of bummed. You're totally, completely bummed. And oh boy, when you get hungry in dog form, you are nuts on the subject of food. There was a knock on my bedroom door. Yes, my bedroom door. I knew who I was again. I was Jake. Jake with 4 legs, a tail, and a snout, but Jake. The knocking seemed incredibly loud to my dog ears. Jake, you got Homer in there with you? My brother Tom's voice. Mom's on the phone. Stop him yapping. He opened the door and stepped in and looked around confused. Who are you? He demanded of Tobias. I'm Tobias. I'm a friend of Jake's. Well, where is he? Oh, he's around, Tobias said. Tom looked down at me. There was a strange smell about him. My dog brain couldn't quite identify it. It was an unsettling, dangerous smell, and somehow in my own mind I heard the echo of a laugh, a very human laugh I had heard the night before as Visser 3 swallowed the Andalite whole. "Bad dog," Tom said to me. "You keep quiet, bad dog." And then he left. I was devastated. I wasn't a bad dog. Not really. I was just barking because some other dog was in my yard. Bad dog? I was a bad dog? No, I wanted to be a good dog. I crept into the corner, utterly miserable. Tobias knelt down and patted my head. When he scratched me behind the ears, I felt a little better. Chapter 10. I called all the others on the phone after I got done morphing back into my normal body. Tobias took off on his own, saying he'd hook up with us later at Cassie's farm. I was on the phone with Cassie when Tom came in. "Oh, there you are," he said. I covered the mouthpiece. "Yeah, Tobias said you were looking for me before?" "I just wanted to shut your dog up," Tom said. He turned the chair around backwards and straddled it. I hesitated. For some reason, I didn't want to talk to Cassie with Tom listening in. "I'll just see you there in a couple hours, okay?" I told Cassie. I hung up. I looked over at Tom. He's bigger than me, even though I'm not exactly small. His hair is darker, almost black, while mine is brown. I had always trusted him. He wasn't like a lot of guys who pound on their younger brother. We were always kind of close, at least until this last year or so. Somehow we just weren't spending as much time together. Partly it was that he was involved in this club called The Sharing. They did all this stuff together, so he was busy a lot of the time. The thing is, Tom should have been the very first person I told about the stuff that had happened. But as I was sitting there watching him munch toast, I just had this feeling. This feeling said no, this has to be a secret, even from Tom. Instead, I told him the other thing I was afraid to tell him. "I, didn't make the team," I said. "What team?" he asked. He looked puzzled. "What team? The basketball team. Your old team." "Oh, too bad," he said. "Too bad?" I repeated. I could not believe how little he seemed to care. "It's just sports," he said. He munched another big bite of toast. "Just sports?" I couldn't stop repeating what he said. Tom saying sports was no big deal? No way. He lived for sports. "Yeah, I guess I just don't have your total skill." He shrugged. "Well, I quit the team anyway, a couple days ago." I practically fell off my chair. "You quit? You quit the team? And you didn't even talk to me about it? What's the deal?" I didn't say anything because I knew you and Dad would make a big thing of it. "Look, there are more important things than throwing balls through hoops," he said. He had this mysterious look in his eyes. I figured he meant girls were the more important thing. "Besides," he added, "we do much cooler stuff at the Sharing. Maybe you should join up." I was stunned. Obviously, Tom and I were further apart than I had realized. When we were done talking, I headed outside to mow the lawn. I mow the lawn every Saturday. It's my major chore. That and taking out the trash, which I hate because we have to do all this recycling stuff. When I was finally done mowing and trimming and raking, I hopped on my bike and took off. I had arranged with everyone to hook up at Cassie's farm. It isn't exactly a normal farm, although it had been in the old days, and they still do have horses and a cow. But now the big red main barn is the wildlife rehabilitation clinic. Cassie's father runs it. They take in any kind of injured animal except pet-type animals. There are always lots of birds, along with squirrels and deers and skunks and so on. Sometimes they get a bobcat or fox or even a wolf. Cassie's mom is a vet too, but she works at the gardens. That's this huge amusement park that also has a zoo, or I guess they call it a wildlife park. Luckily, Cassie really loves animals. It would have been hard having her parents if she didn't really love animals. Me, I have a dog. Tobias has a cat. Cassie has everything from porcupines to polar bears. By the time I got there, Marco, Tobias, and Rachel were already waiting outside the barn. Rachel had her face turned up to catch the tanning rays of the sun. Cassie wasn't there yet. I figured she was doing chores. She had tons of work to do around there. "Hey guys," I said. Rachel opened her eyes and immediately thrust the newspaper at me. "Look," she said, pointing at the article. I started to read the article. It wasn't very long. It said that police claimed there had been a disturbance in the construction site the night before. It said several people had called claiming they'd seen flying saucers landing there, followed by bright lights. Cool, I said, looking up. So the cops know about it now. That's a relief. Keep reading, Rachel said. The article had went on to say that the police had arrived on the scene and found a group of teenagers playing with fireworks. The teenagers had ran away. Fireworks were discovered at the scene. The police spokesman had laughed at the reports of flying saucers. It was just a bunch of kids playing around where they shouldn't have been, he said. There were definitely no flying saucers. People shouldn't be so quick to believe nonsense. But this is a total lie, I said. Ding, 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 ding. Correct answer. Johnny, tell our contestant what he's won, Marco said. Did you see that last part? Rachel pressed. I read the last sentence. It froze me up good, I can tell you. Police were offering a reward for information on the teenagers. They're looking for us, Marco said. Why would the police why would they lie? I wondered aloud, but the answer was pretty obvious. Marco laughed his sardonic laugh. Let's see, Captain Brilliant. Would it be because the cops are controllers? Probably not all the cops, Tobias pointed out. If the police have been infiltrated by the controllers, who knows how many others have too? Rachel asked. Teachers? People in the government? The newspapers and the TV? Math teachers for sure, Marco joked. We all looked around nervously, like we expected to find ourselves surrounded by controllers. I tried to tell myself it was all a dream, Rachel said. Been there, I said. For a while, no one said anything. We all felt the same terrible feeling, like we were all alone. Like suddenly we were dealing with stuff that was way, way, way over our heads. Marco spoke first. Look, why do we have to deal with this? I say we just forget it. We never talk about it. We never morph. We just deal with our own lives. Tobias and Rachel both looked at me. They were waiting for me to argue with Marco. Marco, I halfway agree with you, I started to say. Suddenly Marco went ballistic. We could get killed, he yelled. Don't you get it? You saw what happens to the Andalite. This is radical stuff, Jake. This is for real. Real. We could all get killed. Tobias was looking at Marco with a sideways look, like he thought maybe Marco was some kind of coward. I knew better. Marco had his reasons. Marco shook his head. In a quiet voice he said, Look, I think these controllers are jerks, but if something happened to me, my dad, he wouldn't be able to handle it. 2 years ago, Marco's mom died. She drowned. They never even found her body. Marco's dad lost it big time. He totally fell apart. He quit his job as an industrial engineer because he couldn't handle being around other people. Now he was working as a night janitor, making barely enough to support Marco. He spent his days sleeping or watching TV with the sound off. You can all think I'm a weasel if you want, Marco said, but I don't care. But if I get killed or something, my dad will flat out die. He's only hanging in there because of me. I wondered if I should go pat him on the back or something, but if I had, Marco being Marco would have just said something sarcastic. There's Cassie, Rachel said, shielding her eyes and looking off across the open field. A horse galloping across the green. Its black mane was flying in the warm breeze. I didn't see any rider. The horse slowed, trotting closer, and suddenly I had a strange feeling about the horse. Cassie and I have been here for a while, Rachel said by way of explanation. She's really good at this. Look how fast she can do it. The horse snickered softly. Then the horse began to melt. The big brown eyes became slightly smaller. The long muzzle became a human mouth. A thing that was part of the horse and part Cassie smiled at us with its big horse teeth and said, Hey kids. Marco suddenly sat down, very hard. He had never seen a morphing. It's cool, I said, trying to sound very relaxed. It's just Cassie. I decided I'd better be a gentleman and look away. After all, when Tobias and I had morphed, we kind of morphed right out of our clothes. But I noticed that as Cassie emerged from the horse, she was wearing a skin-tight blue outfit, one of those outfits girls wear to do aerobics. I watched and saw something beautiful happen. For just a few seconds, she stayed half horse and half human. She reminded me of the Andalite. I realized it was deliberate. Cassie was controlling the way she morphed. Geez, Rachel, I said. You're right. Cassie is good. Suddenly we heard the sound of tires on gravel. We all spun around. Down the gravel and dirt road came a single black and white car. The cops! Tobias cried.